Alright guys, BLM here, back with a new video, and in this video I'm back with another Survivor casting video. A casting video for a theme that might seem super random, though might be more plausible than what it should be, and that is Survivor First Boots versus Runners-Up, which, again, feels really random. Like, why are First Boots and Runners-Up being paired against each other? I don't know, but Jeff Probst seems to love this idea, as this entire concept came from the On Fire podcast with Jeff Probst, where he did mention that they would never do a First Boots season. However, they would consider doing a season with a tribe of First Boots facing off against a tribe of finalists. And taking that concept, why not make it into a casting video here? So here I'll be running through the First Boots and the Runners-Up that I think could be eligible for a season like this and create two tribes of 10. And again, I'm going to keep this to a semi-realistic cast. Again, obviously, you never know who's going to be fully available at what time. So these are people that I think would be willing to say yes, and people that I think production are willing to bring back as well. So with that, let's start off on the First Boot side of things, where I might as well go through the people that I considered in chronological order. And straight up, from the First Boot side of things, I really did not end up putting anyone in the cast until pretty late in Survivor history. And a lot of the reason for that is because I think that's a lot of the reason why they didn't want to do First Boot seasons, because I don't think they want to bring back a lot of First Boots from early on. Again, Jeff Probst explicitly said the fact that many people wouldn't even remember who a lot of the older First Boots are. And mixing that and the fact that really, I don't know how many of the earlier First Boots would even be in contention just naturally anyway. No one extremely early on in Survivor history made it on the list, but again, I'll still talk about some people that I did at least consider, where I did want to consider someone like a Peter Harkey, who I think would be a really interesting returnee, though one that I think is just completely off production's radar at this point. Nicole Delma, I know, is someone that is still around the Survivor community, however, didn't quite fit the cast. Brooke Garrity is someone that is obviously a massive Survivor fan, and it would be nice to see someone like him get another chance, though again, did not put him on. Jolanda is someone that was actually kind of close to making it on, at least someone that was in contention, especially considering, again, I did also try to follow the diversity mandate, which definitely helped her chances, though she didn't end up making it on. Timbertina was someone I really wanted to consider as well, someone that I would just feel bad for in Survivor history, that didn't make the cast. I did consider Sekou Bunch, as it just would have been kind of funny. And truth be told, Sekou is actually not that far away for making it on this cast. Mind you, again, largely because of diversity mandate, especially from the men's side of things, where I do feel like the male First Boots that were eligible for this list was not the most diverse grouping in the world, and because Sekou could have been on, but again, he didn't make the cut. Consider Jessica DeBen as someone that, again, Jeff Probst has always talked about as someone that he's really liked, though I think at this point it's been a bit far removed, where I don't think she would really be in contention. Chicken Morris would have been funny as a big notable character, the one that, again, I just don't know if the casuals really remember him, and at the end of the day, didn't make the cut. Considered Carolina Eastwood, because it would also just be kind of funny, and someone that I think production could possibly remember, but not one that was really that close to making the list. Also considered Marisa as someone that, again, had a pretty notable first episode, being this foil to Russell Hantz, and considering how Stephanie Valencia was in the running for Second Chance, and a lot of the big tagline from Jeff on her was that, oh, she worked with Russell Hantz. I feel like Marisa, I could see having a similar tagline of like, oh, she worked against Russell Hantz. So again, I don't feel like she makes the cut. Sadly, I did also have the cut Zane Knight. Now, Zane was actually kind of close to making it on. For me, it was between Zane and the first person that we'll be talking about that did make it on the list. Though, while Zane is a very notable First Boot from a superfan perspective, I don't think Jeff looks at Zane Knight as that notable person. Like, I think Zane Knight's probably the type of person that Jeff Probst would not even be able to remember at this point in Survivor history. And because I did not put Zane on. Also, to consider Marissa from Survivor Blood vs. Water, someone that was also very close to making it on, someone that was definitely in contention, though I decided that there's just probably other people that were more recent that were more likely to be brought back. Now, for someone else, I did consider Nadia, and Nadia was someone that I would have put on for sure if Nadia wanted to play again. However, I believe there's rumblings that she doesn't want to play again, and considering already the tough field from the women's side of things in particular, I did end up leaving Nadia off. And the final person I considered that did not make the list from First Boot side of things is Sarah Wilson. I was one of the more recent First Boots on the board, and to be fair, she was in contention, though I just went with someone else over her. And even then with Sarah, there's like this debate of, is she even the First Boot, as obviously Abraham was voted out before her, so again, just kind of made it a bit wonky to where I didn't put her on. But with that, now let's get into the people that did make my cast here. Again, in chronological order, starting it off with Survivor Cagayan, I do have David Samson, who, again, for me, it was close between David and Zane. I did feel like they kind of fit a similar mold, though I did feel like David felt more in line with the modern casting choice. David's someone that I think production would remember as obviously a former CEO of the Miami Marlins, and I think they would look at him as a big, bold player, someone that they would typically like on modern Survivor. And while I think you can argue that with Zane, I do think there's an aspect of Zane that is just him kind of quitting. I think they just wouldn't really want to risk that, especially over David Samson, who I think is there more so just to play the game, and I think that's something that they would like in the modern day as a potential returnee. So again, I did pick David Samson here. Next up, we're moving on to Worlds Apart, where this was one of the bigger locks on the board. I did put So Kim on the cast. Again, So Kim, I think, is one of these people that would for sure be on a season like this. They've been trying to bring back So Kim for seasons now, where she's been in the running for all of Second Chance, Game Changers, and what was initially going to be Survivor 40. Like, they very much want to bring So Kim back, and I feel like for a first boot season, it's a no-brainer. She would easily be on. Next up is someone that I don't think would be that likely of a returnee on any given season, though again, on a first boot season, especially one that is struggling with diversity mandate, I think it's very easy to put on Darnell from Ko Rong, who I would personally love to see back. Darnell's always been one of my favorite earlier boots, one of the first boots that's had the most amount of potential if they were to play again, and someone that I would very much like to see back. I feel like for a season like this, again, not that many diverse men have been voted out first, and I feel like Darnell perfectly fits this role here, especially adding a lot of physicality to the tribe as well. Again, it just makes a lot of sense. Next, I'm moving forward a little bit in Survivor history. Moving on to Ghost Island, I did put on Gonzalez, and Gonzalez was a little bit of a question mark for me. I do think Gonzalez is someone that could have been swapped out for someone like a Nadia, or even like a Marissa if I really wanted to, though I feel like Gonzalez is probably more likely than Marissa, and again, I think Nadia probably would say no, so I did go with Gonzalez here. Again, someone that seemed to have some potential in the game. While she's not necessarily like a first pick in my mind from a production standpoint, I feel like she could at least be in the runnings, and considering all the other limitations with this list, I feel like she was a decent pick here. Next up for David versus Goliath, I did end up putting on Pat Cusick. Now, this is kind of a weird one, as obviously I don't consider Pat Cusick a first boot. I would consider the first boot Jessica Pete. That's the first person voted off. However, I feel like production would consider Pat Cusick the first boot, as the first person eliminated from the game, and through that, Pat Cusick is someone that they've been trying to bring back. And we know that they tried to bring back for 40, and someone that they did very much like. And I feel like for a first boot season, again, makes a lot of sense to bring him back here. So he was a pretty clear-cut one. Also clear-cut was Reem from Edge of Extinction. Again, I think this is a pretty easy one where, while Reem is a bit of a weird first boot, and the fact that she obviously got a lot of screen time through her being on the edge, I do feel like as a whole, she's obviously someone that would be in contention for this list. I feel like she's someone that is still brought up by Probst now and then, to where this feels like an easy pick. Next up was one of the harder picks on the board. However, again, due to the diversity mandate, I felt like it was kind of a necessity, and that person is Ronnie Bardaw from IOI. Now, at the end of the day, I don't know how likely it is that they're going to be looking at Ronnie. I don't think Ronnie is like a top pick from production to bring back. However, again, there's not that many men that are even eligible, and also men that aren't these like physical liabilities for their tribe, and also considering diversity mandate. Again, Ronnie Bardaw just made a lot of sense to put on the cast here. But now we're finally into a new era where we're starting it off with Survivor 42, and this is one that is a bit weird, but I decided to just go with it anyway. That person is Zach Wartenberger, and the reason this is weird is because, as I stated before, I do think they would consider Pat the first boot from David vs. Goliath, and through that, that would mean that Jackson's technically the first boot from 42. However, I feel like they would be willing to not be super consistent with their rulings here. So I think Zach is someone that, again, I can see them bringing back in a season like this. While he's not someone that is particularly likely on a general all-star season, when we're looking at only first boots, I do think they liked him well enough to where they would be willing to bring him back. And considering also that he fits in like a bit of a different archetype from a lot of the other first boots on the board, I feel like Zach felt like an easy pick for me. And with that, we're continuing on to the next season as well. On Survivor 43, I did put on Mariah. Now, Mariah is someone that, again, I don't see production being particularly high on in the grand scheme of things. Like, Mariah is someone that I think the only chance she comes back is for her first boot season. However, in a season like this, where again, I do feel like they're going to lean a lot more recent, also considering diversity mandates and just in general casting archetypes, I feel like Mariah just kind of fits this cast pretty well, where she does feel very different from the other first boots on the board here. And considering how openly she wants to play again. I feel like Mariah was a decent pick here. And the final pick here is, again, from the most recent season, we do have Maddie. And again, there's another one, a little bit weird. Again, is Bruce technically the first boob? Again, Bruce is already coming back, so we're good. I'm putting on Maddie. And for me, it was like a debate between Maddie and Sarah. However, I just feel like Maddie just had more of a splash on the season. While Sarah probably got more personal content and whatnot, I feel like Maddie definitely made more of an impact to me. And considering she's from also the most recent season of the show, I felt like it made a lot of sense to put her on here. But there we go. I mean, that is the first boot side of things. Now let's get into the runner-up side of things, where once again, I'll be running through the people that didn't make the cut in chronological order. Now, I will also clarify that while Jeff Probst himself did say that he wanted a tribe of runners up, he did also state people that made it to the end. And through that, kind of made me a bit wonky of like, okay, should I only be including second placers or should I be including anyone that made it to final tribal? I decided to go with the final tribal route just because it makes it a lot easier, as obviously that increases the casting pool, which straight up, I think that's how production would handle this too. I think production would handle this in a way that makes it easier to cast, which is by opening it up to anyone that made the final tribal. But like the first boots, I also did heavily skew pretty recent with this side of the cast as well, where a lot of the earlier players on the board here I did not end up putting on, but again, we'll still run through them anyway. I did consider Colby. I think Colby would be a very interesting returnee, especially for a season like this, again, where he's kind of the definitive runner-up as, again, a person that was around very early on in Survivor history, but also someone that was so close to winning and someone that made this decision that cost him the game. And I think through that would be an interesting return here, though it did not quite make it on. I did also consider Twyla as someone that I know production's been wanting to bring back now and then, and again, this would have been a decent slot for her. However, she just didn't make the cut. Definitely the Grosso was someone I greatly considered as well, though I did end up deciding to cut her just due to the fact that I feel like, again, it's probably just better off to keep it more recent, considering I do feel like that's how Survivor would cast nowadays. And I think considering this isn't like some sort of legend season or stuff like that, I feel like it was about right to leave off Stephanie. Dana DeLorenzo was someone I considered, considering again, she seems like another person that is in the running at points. And while I definitely could have squeezed her on a list if I really wanted to, I decided just not. Also considered Ozzy, and again, Ozzy kind of fits into the Colby mold of someone that would have been a very solid pick here, would have obviously been a big name, though I also feel like it's a bit overpowered, especially on a tribe of runners up versus first boots, again, where he just feels like he overpowers anyone that could even be possible on the first boot tribe, so I left him off there. Also considered Amanda, though Amanda's the one that's I'm a bit questionable on like whether or not she would want to play again, and then again, I decided to keep it a bit more modern, so again, Amanda did not make it on. Also considered Russell Hantz. But this is a situation where, again, I don't think they would call Russell Hantz. Now, from Redemption Island, I consider both Philip and Natalie. Now, I do feel like Philip would probably turn it down, and that's why he didn't make it on. Well, Natalie is someone I did consider, especially considering, like, the women's side of things for this cast ends up being a bit skewed older, and I feel like Natalie would obviously skew in the younger side of things. However, I went with a different option over her. I did also consider Coach, who obviously would have been great to have back on a cast like this. However, I did feel like, again, it felt a bit weird for me to cast these like massive legends of the game on a season like this. I feel like this is probably more suited to these more recent players. So again, Coach didn't make it on. I also consider both Sabrina and Chelsea as these people that have been in the running for multiple returnee seasons, or just neither of them made it on. I also consider Jervis and Monica, with Jervis at a point being on the cast, again, to help with the diversity mandate, though he didn't make it on, and then Monica was not particularly close, considering I just feel like there's people in our archetype that are more likely. I did also consider Wu, who again would have helped with diversity mandate, though I feel like the surfer bro sort of guy is a spot that's already taken on this cast, so he didn't make it on. Also considered Spencer, where actually Spencer was someone that I was thinking would make the cast. I mean, he was someone that was pretty much locked on the cast when I initially started it. However, as time went on, I ended up leaving him off largely because I just feel like there's another person that is probably a bigger lock on the board at this point that fits into a similar archetype to him. So I just went with that person over him. I did also consider Aubrey, though I think my question with Aubrey is more so like, does she really want to play again? I don't know if that's the case. And even then, she wouldn't even been a lock on the board. So again, I just decided to leave her off. I also consider Brad Culpepper as someone that probably would have been on the list if Brad Culpepper was more likely to want to play again. But even beyond that, I feel like there's another person on the actual cast that fits into his archetype, and the other person kind of helps with diversity to where Brad Culpepper just didn't make it on. Also considered Chrissy, and straight up, the main reason Chrissy's not on this cast is because of diversity mandate, where I've talked about this in a lot of casting videos, I feel like at this point, where Chrissy and another person kind of fit into the same mold. However, the other person is a POC, while Chrissy isn't, and that kind of just helps with diversity mandate. So I went with the other person over Chrissy. So that's kind of the way it went. Also considered both Dean and Nora from IOI, where Dean simply just did not make the cut. Nora was a bit more in contention. However, again, I feel like archetype-wise, there's a certain other person that's a bigger lock on the board. I did go with that person over Nora. From 41, I did consider Deshawn, and he's someone I definitely wouldn't be opposed to have back here, though, again, just someone that didn't really feel like they fit the cast itself. And I did consider Heidi as well, but it's kind of another one of these situations where I feel like her slot's already filled on this cast. And I didn't want to make it too heavily New Era, as the inclusion of Heidi on here would have made it over half the runner-up tribe would have been New Era, which I think is a bit overpowered. So again, I left her off. But with that, let's get into the actual runners-up that did make the cast. Again, going through them in chronological order, starting off the person I picked over Chrissy, and that person is Carolyn Rivera. To where Carolyn, again, I just feel like is a very similar archetype, both on the older side of things age-wise, but also very well-rounded players, good in challenges, decent strategic players. Both had kind of similar issues by the end of the game in terms of jury management. They're, again, just feeling like they fit the same role, but Carolyn is POC, well, Chrissy isn't, and through that helps Carolyn spot in this cast, so again, she ended up making it on over her. Next up, moving on to one of the few two-time players on this list, and that is from Survivor Cambodia. We're going to have Tasha. Tasha's someone that, immediately after Cambodia, I was like, I didn't need to see her again, but I think at this point, I'm kind of fine if she were to play again. She was obviously on the Challenge USA, and I feel like she had a okay run there, and considering also diversity mandate and whatnot, and obviously the very limited pool to begin with, and also, again, not wanting to skew too much to the New Era, I feel like Tasha just kind of made sense here, where, again, the likes of a Heidi, a Aubrey, a Monica Culpepper, a Sabrina, like all those people are people that could have taken this spot, and if I really wanted to stick to, for sure, making it only two-time players, I definitely could have swapped Tasha out. However, I decided just to not even bother with that, and again, decided to put Tasha on. Next up, the other already two-time player person on the list, and this is moving on to Ko Rong, where here we do have Tai Trang. And again, Tai is someone that I wouldn't be opposed to seeing back again. I feel like for a season like this, he kind of fits the mold here. Someone that isn't like too overpowered against the first boots, so someone that is still a very competent player, one that is going to play very hard, one that helps out with diversity mandate, one that just fills a lot of roles on this cast, to where I just feel like Tai makes a lot of sense to have here. Now, again, I think technically I could have swapped it out for someone like a Deshawn if I really, really wanted to, though I just feel like as a whole, but again, I feel like just to stick away from putting too many New Era people, I thought Tai was a better choice here. Next up, moving on to probably one of the biggest locks on the board, I obviously have Dominic. And again, Dominic I think is a lock. I would be surprised if Dominic wasn't on a season like this, where again, he's pretty much the definitive runner-up. The person who have lost the game that came the closest to winning. It just makes a lot of sense to have Dominic here. My one hesitancy was the fact that I feel like Dominic could be overpowered. I feel like Dominic is by far the best player on this cast, and it's not even close. I think that's a bit of a worry, but outside of that, I feel like Dominic was such an easy lock for the cast here, to where he easily made it on. Next up, moving on to David versus Goliath, and this one's also a lock if she wants it, and that person is Angelina. Now, I think there's a chance that Angelina could potentially say no, that she'd be too busy in her real life, though I think at the end of the day, if Angelina has the time to do so, I think she would say yes. I do think production would obviously very much like her. And again, she just kind of perfectly fits this cast. Obviously adding diversity, but also just being a fantastic character and one that is still going to play hard. And again, just perfect casting here. Easily made it on. And with that, we're on to the New Era, where again, half this tribe ends up coming from the New Era. But first, I'll start with the person that I mentioned earlier that replaced Spencer. And that person is from Survivor 41. We do have Xander. And again, I just think Xander's a very likely returning at this point. I do think as time goes on, Xander will probably be less and less likely, kind of being the like Michael Yerger sort of phase of someone that was extremely popular at the time of their seasons, but then it just becomes too far away. But I think at this point, Xander is still pretty likely. I think Xander is someone that they definitely would want back. And again, considering the limited pool here, I feel like Xander is an easy pick. Next up for 42, I did end up putting on Mike Turner. Now, this one was a bit more up in the air for me, where as I mentioned earlier, I think Brad Culpepper is someone that could have taken this spot, or even if I wanted to add in the likes of like a Phillip or a Coach or even a Colby, I feel like Mike is the person I would have replaced. However, again, Mike is still very recent. I feel like it's someone that is still in production's minds. I think someone that is probably likely to come back, and considering how much they like 42 as a season, and considering I didn't put Romeo on, I felt like Mike was the person that made a lot of sense to put here. So again, he made it on the cast. Next up for 43, and this is kind of weird as 43 ends up being the only season where I put both of the runners up on the cast itself, which is funny considering production didn't like 43. However, I feel like both these people are people that are likely to come back for a season like this. Starting it off with Owen, who I think Owen is someone that is very high on their radars right now. And we're not too far removed from the season. I feel like Owen is someone that they clearly liked. Now, again, I think another one that over time probably will become less and less likely. However, I think for right now, perfectly fits this cast. Again, not too overpowered in terms of his overall game ability. Someone that has a great returning story considering his Charlie Brown-esque run his first time around. Also someone that has a lot of potential in the game. It makes me add the fact that he also adds to diversity mandate, and it's just a genuine massive fan of the show, something that production obviously very much likes in their recent casting choices. I feel like Owen is an easy pick here. The other one ends up being Cassidy, and Cassidy, I will say, I do question if production would really want her back. I don't have a great sense of how production as a whole feels about Cassidy, where if we were to do a returnee season coming up, I don't know if Cassidy makes the cut there. However, again, this is a cast of only runners-up. And I think that greatly helps Cassidy's position here, considering the fact that there's not many other people like Cassidy in the pool here. Again, just in general, there's not that many younger women even eligible here. So I think just because of that, she's an easy pick. But even beyond that, again, I think she's someone that still has an interesting returning storyline and is a capable all-around player. And I think in comparison to the first boot side of things, I feel like she kind of perfectly matches up against the likes of a Maddie or even a Gonzalez, to where, again, I just think in general, decent pick here. So again, she made it on. And the final person to make it on the cast is probably the most obvious person on the board. Obviously, we got to have Carolyn. And Carolyn's coming back for any returning season they have moving forward if she wants it. I think this is a pretty locked spot here. Again, considering the limitation of runners up, it just makes it even more obvious that obviously they're going to have Carolyn on a season like this, which makes it funny considering Carolyn Rivera and Carolyn Weiger are both on the cast on this small of a tribe, but it's kind of just the way it ended up being. But again, with that, that's everyone on my first boots versus runner-up cast here to run through. On the first boot side of things, I do have David Sampson, So Kim, Darnell Hamilton, Stephanie Gonzalez, Pat Cusick, Reem Daly, Ronnie Bardaw, Zach Wurtenberger, Mariah Young, and Maddie Pamela. While on the runner-up side of things, I do have Carolyn Rivera, Tasha Fox, Tai Trang, Dominic Abate, Angelina Keeley, Xander Hastings, Mike Turner, Owen Knight, Cassidy Clark, and Carolyn Weiger. Again, that's my cast of Survivor first boots versus runners-up. Again, still a concept I think is really bizarre, and it'd be so funny to see if production actually goes through this at some point down the road. But really a concept that just doesn't really feel like it needs to be made. Though, I mean, to be fair, again, it could be interesting. I actually think this is a somewhat decent cast. I actually would like to see a cast like this play the game, so at least there's that to it. But either way, obviously down the road, I'll continue to do more casting videos, what ifs, rankings. Probably the next casting video that's going to come out for Survivor, at least, will be a Battle of the New Era seasons video that I had some fun putting together. So stay tuned for that at some point down the road. But for now, that is the video. Thank you for watching.